And I'd like to greet you again. It's a privilege to minister to you in the Word and to teach the Word of God. Teaching is a sacred qualification. In the ministry, it is a divine one. God has said in the church, Christ has said in the church, apostles and prophets and teachers and evangelists and pastors, God sets in the church those that speak His Word with authority and with discernment as to the meaning of what God is speaking about. We are at this time in a very select group of studies. I'm sure you're very much aware of that. In this group of studies, it is called Demons and Deliverance, or Principalities and Powers. And this is Volume 1. Volume 2, which has already been created, deals with many of the sects and occult groups and how to avoid them and how to have victory related to them. We're dealing with the basic doctrines in this syllabus, volume number 1. We have now come to lesson 9 in the teaching series here, in your teaching syllabus, which I hope you already have. Remember, you can get this in writing with a large teaching syllabi, or you can get it in the audio tape, or you can get it in the large group here with them all together, or you can get them in the video. And so in the reading and the hearing and the seeing, you can get this truth, and I tell you, it'll do something for you. It will certainly do something for you. In the teaching syllabus, we are at what we call lesson 6. That's on page 27. But in our teaching to you, this is the ninth segment of the lesson. In this area, we're teaching you relative to different areas in which the devil can dominate and have power. It is a historic fact that the devil's influence can dominate and even destroy empires, nations. For example, in the Revelation chapter 18 in verse 2, it says, Babylon the Great is fallen and is become the habitation of devils and the hold of every foul spirit. And we can see here that even empires can be destroyed by satanic forces and satanic power. God, speaking through His prophet Isaiah, one of the greatest prophets in the Bible, in chapter 14 and verse 12 says, How art thou fallen from heaven, Lucifer, who you are the son of the morning? How art you cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? Which did weaken the nations. And so the areas of demon domination, it can be extensive in scope. It can be vast in their operations. In that same chapter of Isaiah chapter 14 and verse 16, it says, Is this the man that made the earth to tremble? Someone looking upon Satan after his defeat says, that did shake kingdoms. See his influence? That can shake kingdoms, that can make the world into a wilderness. Now, I was in Europe just after World War II, and you talk about a wilderness. I was at the beaches of Normandy, and I saw the scope of devastation just a few days after the war was over. And you know what it means when it says make the world a wilderness. When you're in a city that you have ministered in before, and you look and there's only about a dozen chimneys hanging in the air, every building is gone, then you know what a wilderness means. It is a terrible and a dreadful situation. How can Satan make the earth to tremble, as it says here in Isaiah chapter 14? I believe that an example of this could be like Napoleon the Great. The devil caused him to bring war upon the continent of Europe. It was totally an unnecessary situation. Through Napoleon, he made this earth to tremble. Human historians saw Napoleon destroying Europe with bloodthirsty armies, and they called him the Great, Napoleon the Great. But when God saw it, He saw Lucifer, his arch enemy, energizing and inspiring a little man named Napoleon to make the earth to tremble. And so God's viewpoint of it and man's viewpoint of it are always totally different. Totally different. This is true not only with a man like Napoleon, but there's Alexander the Great. Humans recorded his natural forces and his natural abilities and his natural genius that he had. But God saw the driving force that made him desire to kill, to destroy, to exalt himself above all other rulers. That Alexander was under demon possession is easily revealed in the way that he died. He died in a drunken orgy at the age of 33. He ate and drank himself to death. And he said at that time, there are no more worlds to conquer. What can I do? So there was a bloodthirsty urge within him. People to kill. People to say, you're under me, you're under me. And so Satan can make the earth to tremble. In modern times, we can see influences in the lives of men like the German dictator Adolf Hitler, or in Italy with Mussolini, El Duce. These men made boastful statements of how they would dominate the world. Hitler said, for 1,000 years, Nazism will dominate the world. Mussolini once declared, I would shake hands with the devil if he will give me the desires of my heart. And that was conquest. Went into little Ethiopia and overthrew the government, thought he was a great big hero of overthrowing that little black people there in Ethiopia. And he aligned himself with Hitler and was going to help be a world conqueror. I saw the filling station where he hung upside down until the Italians had kicked his body into where his head was only a thing as big as your fist. They had just kicked it to pieces. That he died in the deepest of ignominy and shame. And so the devil made him believe, that he could bring up an empire and he would be Caesar the Great. You see, demons wish to destroy nations. Italy has never been a strong nation since. Ever since the war, her little governments topple one right after the other. They don't know whether they want communism or whether they want fascism or whether they want democracy. They can't make up their minds. And so one government after another falls over there. God said of Lucifer that he was one who made the world into a wilderness. The Bible clearly states that Babylon was controlled by his powers and his powers of evil, and that he would finally be judged. As we read in Isaiah 13, verse 19, Babylon, the glory of the kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. You see, that was a prophecy in Isaiah 13, verses 19 to 22. It shall not be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. That was the curse of God, and it's still a curse against that area. It's a wilderness today. It is a wilderness today. It is not a luxuriant place, the most beautiful spot on the globe. We understand that much of the world's witchcraft that is in the world today was born in Babylon, bred in Babylon, foisted upon other peoples from Babylon. It was cultivated and distributed from there to destroy the whole world, generation after the generation, causing people to worship Lucifer. And so the first place that the devil would like to destroy the earth is by nations, that with demons that cannot be seen with the natural eye, dominating nations. History records the sinister works of evil in this way, that almost for unknown reasons, you see, nations are destroyed because of their worship of the devil. It is remarkable that the people of Israel, in their olden times, they had to fight against this sort of situation. They had to keep it out of their nation. In the book of Exodus, chapter 22 and verse 18, God specifically warned Moses in these words, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." You see, God said that in His commandments. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. God knew that these people would turn the entire nation over to the devil, would turn the entire nation over to Satan if they permitted it. In 1 Chronicles chapter 10 and verse 13, it says, God removed Saul from his kingdom, and that he died for his transgression of seeking after witchcraft. He died because of it. God would not permit his people and his land to be taken over by demon power. And so the devil doesn't seek primarily for persons. The devil primarily seeks for nations and empires to control them. In our world that we live in today, as we have visited country after country, it makes you feel, and some of them, sad and depressed. Not that we wish to downgrade any country. As some of these countries we greatly love, such as Indonesia, for example. I preached in Indonesia when the Dutch ruled it before the war, and after the Dutch were gone, and it was a republic after the war. But we have lived in that country for many months, and I am very sincere when I tell you that I have witnessed more demon power there than possibly any other place, because there are more witch doctors in that country than there are medical doctors. And we couldn't have a meeting pleading the blood of Jesus and the power of God without some form of witchcraft, interrupting the meeting. The devil gets angry when you are telling people about him. And so we witnessed and we saw where devils want to control nations, such as the nation of Indonesia, which is so strongly steeped in witchcraft as of this moment. Also, when we were in Singapore, a little nation that is so full of heathen temples, we discovered that heathen worshipers in coming to Singapore must pay their due respects to a very powerful dignitary who is the spiritual ruler of the area. His name is Pa. And before they can go and worship the other Buddhists and in the other temples, they have to come to this number one place and first pay their respects and give an offering, and then they can feel free to go and worship in other temples. The heathen worshipers must go to this temple, or they cannot go into any temple. Pa gets very angry and will bring a curse upon them, and so they must not worship other places before they worship Pa. And this is practiced today. You, as a visitor, may not find out much about it. You have to kind of live with the people and talk to them in order to understand some of these things. In most pagan countries or heathen countries who are under the power of Satan, they have special categories of spirits possessing various degrees of power and of authority in their lands. For example, there's the land of Tibet, where Satan has held supremacy for ages. For ages. I have personally traveled into the Tibetan country, among the high mountains of southwest China. I have slept in their heathen temples, where there no other place to sleep anyway. And I saw their idol-filled temples, and listened to the strange stories of demon power. And brother, they got them. You've never heard anything like it when they talk to you about the supernatural activities that take place in those areas. But the devil is supreme, and the leader of the land, of course, it's under communist China right now, but the leader of the land and the political leaders is the same person, and their witchcraft and their Oriental guruism. You see, and a lot of people in America want to become like they are in Tibet. Isn't that amazing? They said that they have the high spirits. They do. They've had a lot of time to seek after the devil and to know him. But you wouldn't want him in your life like that. I can assure you that you would not desire it. Another example of the devil taking over nations, I strongly felt a satanic power and force when I traveled more than 5,000 miles across communist Siberia and communist Russia. There was an oppression and a sense of insecurity in the very air that you breathe. I could feel the spiritual heaviness over the entire country. It made one sad on the inside. You could talk to people like news reporters or like teachers or something, and there they're sitting there glum as they were crossing over, and you say, well, how are you today? Oh, all right, I guess. Well, how do you feel? Well, I don't know. All right. Are you sad about something? Well, some way I'm sad. I don't know quite the extent. See, the sinner doesn't even understand why the heaviness is there, why the oppression is there, because it's under the rulership of the devil. All through Moscow, through the city, and through the country, there is a spiritual heaviness of atheism over that land where the devil says, hey, boy, I'm boss here. I am boss here. They don't even believe in God. I got things under good control in this place. And so nations, the devil wants to conquer whole nations. And the devil had to do with conquering Russia. The spiritual people were not spiritual. God's people were not godly. And so the devil walked in communism and said, there isn't any, and took over that land. God saved the rest of the world from godless communism. Nations of the future will also feel this impact of demon power. And during the Great Tribulation upon the earth, there will be great satanic worship upon the face of the earth. In the Revelation, that's the last book in your Bible, and chapter 13 in verse 4, it says, we see that they worship the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. Now the dragon is the devil, and the beast, of course, is the Antichrist. And they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Now it isn't that he is a beast, but his nature within him is like a devouring beast in the jungle, who is able to make war with him. And so there will be political leaders of nations and of empires and of groups of nations that are under direct rule and relationship and the power of the devil. Now that's your point number one. Your point number two is in the middle of page 29. And if the devil cannot take a country, he would like to take a city. He'd like to take a city. I don't know that God ever intended for man to live in urban areas. The first place the cities are mentioned in the Bible, it's not in a good connotation at all. Not only does the devil seek to rule empires, he seeks to dominate cities. Now, if you'll study this with me extensively, you'll find that what I'm saying to you is a tremendous reality. Listen to the book of Revelation, chapter 2 and verse 13. God says, I know your works, talking to a city. Where you dwell even where Satan's seat is. Here the devil had his throne in this city. Where Satan's throne is. That thou holdest fast my name, and hast not denied my faith, even those days when Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwelleth. Isn't that something? Here you have a city, and Satan has a headquarters there. He has a throne there. And then it's where Satan dwelleth. He just made his habitation up there. Now, there are cities that are different from cities. And I'd like to say to all of America, be careful where you live for your children's sake. You can feed your children to the devil in a very wicked environment. When if you weren't so ambitious and you could live for a little less, you could have your children in a rural situation of where they would be brought up in holiness and cleanliness and godliness and also happiness and heaven. Now this city that he was talking to here was Pergamos. It was one of the churches of the apocalypse in the book of Revelation. It is located in a great and a historic area. It was a beautiful place. I have been there personally, by the way. And the Bible says it was a city where Satan was located in their town. This indicates that there are cities where devils set up their thrones and their areas of ruling in these cities. The devil's power is centralized in such places to control multitudes of people. In these cities, the devil has greater strength than he has anywhere else to perform his horrible deeds that he does in the lives of people. There are two areas mentioned here where Satan dwelleth and where Satan's seat is. He dwells there and his seat of power is there. This speaks of his headquarters from which Satan operates, and a throne from which he dictates his evil spirits to tell them what to do in order that he might rule over them. And so you have two aspects there where you have his seat, which is his throne, and you have his dwelling place in an area where he dwells. He lives in a certain place and he sends out his directives from that place. Now, historically, you can point out such cities. For example, ancient Babylon gave itself over to sorceries, to witchcraft, to cults, and without doubt, she was a queen city. Outwardly, very beautiful, very gorgeous. Boasted of its hanging gardens, which have never been duplicated in any other city in the world. But it was dominated by a certain Babylonian spirit, that this spirit had made its habitation there. And this spirit kept Daniel's prayer from being answered when he lived in Babylon. He couldn't get his prayers through because of this dominating spirit in that area. And then in Daniel 10 and verse 20, the angel said that when he left Daniel's presence, he would have to fight a spirit called the Prince of Greece. The angel said that only Michael was available to assist him in this warfare. This reveals that evidently that there are cosmic battles which take place over big cities. Big cities. That's right. And so coming into him, he had a battle with a prince that was over Persia. Going back, he had a battle over the prince of Grecia. And so evidently there are princes set up over certain areas that rule, and they make their strong points the great cities. For example, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah are remarkable examples of demon habitation. These cities gave themselves to a very peculiar and terrible sin, which bears the name of one of the cities until this day, sodomy, from Sodom. You see, it didn't have to bear such a name. The spirit that controlled there caused men to make love with men rather than with women. Only the devil could have caused this thing to happen. Only the devil. Sodomy became so dominant that God was obliged to wipe off the face of the earth that sinful city. He could not tolerate it. He could not stand it. It was out of his regular form of operating on the earth. He says, I won't do it. So Sodom was a city where Satan's seat was. And it was where Satan dwelled. And here his dominated power was supreme as he commanded the people of that city. And so the devil not only wants to control empires, nations, particularly he wants to involve himself over a city, to control a city. Now you might say, could you bring that into any modern description? And I believe I could. I don't like to be offensive to cities, but I think I could. There are modern cities which have given themselves over to certain sins. You see, the sins of New York and the sins of Hollywood are very different. The sins of Las Vegas and the sins of Paris, France, are different, you see. The spirits that rule them are different spirits. I'm sure you're aware of the fact that every city has a spirit in it, and that no two cities of the world possess the same spirit. Now, I'm not speaking of an evil spirit or a good spirit, but every city has its own personality. Every home has its own personality. There are no two homes on the face of the earth that have exactly the same personality. When you walk to the door, the spirits of the people that live there, you can feel their personality. The same is true of a city. I've been in preaching over 1,000 cities of the world. I've never been in two cities that have exactly the same spirit. And when you come there, you have a ministry that you involve yourself in a different spirit, you see, from what you would find in another spirit. So the devil has not changed. There are spirits where certain sins and certain evils are very strong there, and certain spirits dominate until there are no two cities on the face of the earth that are dominated by the same spirit. I am very sensitive to feeling that spirit when I go to any city. And so naturally, some cities have good spirits and others have bad spirits. No doubt you have heard different ministers say that in a certain city, it's very hard to preach there. Yeah, that city has given itself over to spirits. Very hard to work in there. Another says, such and such a city is so open, that the movement of the Spirit of God is so easy there. You see what I mean now? That means you should decide where you want to live. Don't live in an oppressive city. New York City is one of those oppressive cities. A pastor of a great church there came and stood in this pulpit right here. And he said, though I've been there all my life, grew up there, when I get about 20 miles out of town, a spirit lifts off of me. It's a hindering, oppressing spirit that hangs over my city of New York. And he says, when I go back, when that airplane starts to come down into that city, I can feel that oppression of the great city of New York as it comes down upon me. Now that is from a man that has a very large church in that city. Any large metropolis like New York is a possessor of some certain kind of spirit. The larger part of the population, like New York City, does not attend church anywhere. Many of them live in the deepest of sin. New York is a center of commerce for the whole world, for the entire world, and more recently a center for world government. New York City is its center. So if it's one of these spiritualized, if mind your spirits eyes could be open, no doubt we'd be able to see the strong and evil spirits that seek to rule that place. We would be able to see them. And I have a deep burden for cities like this. And in our next lesson, I want to continue with this thought right here. That I have a deep burden for such places, that God will give me strength to. And that's what Jesus meant, that if you go to take a prey, that you first bind the strong man. If you go to take, like a city like New York or like Paris, or like Las Vegas, and you go there to take the city, you first bind the strong man, or you can't take the prey. That it is not possible to take the prey if you don't bind the strong man.